So today we're going to be talking about the journeys in UX. We will be discussing about different paths, transitions, and opportunities taken by our designers in their career paths. If you're currently studying, or if you would like to make a transition into UX, I hope this gives you like a realistic perspective of how you can pursue your own journey as well. So in our panel, we have our product designers from the Redgate Design team. If you guys want to give a little wave. We've got Elena, Beth, Alicia, alongside Matt, who is our head of design. So now our panelists will be taking turns in introducing themselves. And once they have finished, we will kind of like go ahead and open up the discussion for questions. But please feel free to drop any questions that you have in our Q&A window as well. So I'll pick it up once the talks are finished. So on that note, I will stop sharing and I will give it to Beth to start the show. Up to you, Beth.
Sure, thank you. So yeah, I'll try and keep it relatively brief, but I suppose growing up, I was always the kind of weird alternative artsy child. So I've always had a kind of love for art and design and getting creative. I studied, once I left like GCSEs, I went on to study art at A level. And alongside that, I also studied psychology, which was another part that I actually really loved, was understanding the like human nature and sort of why people are influenced by things and sort of the why behind how they're influenced. And after I finished my A levels, I went on to a foundation year where I studied art and design in various disciplines. And off the back of that, at the end of the year, they said that my approach was kind of best suited towards graphic design. So as much as I kind of didn't want to leave psychology behind because of the sort of history that I'd had with art and design, I thought, you know, that was kind of more of a safe bet for me to specialize in. So I went on to Bristol UB, where I studied BA honours in graphic design. I was there until 2005. And actually, if I'm being honest, I left with a lack of love for graphic design. I think my course was quite new, and unfortunately it failed to sort of develop that understanding of the why behind design practices. It felt more like a fine art degree. And I didn't find that what I'd picked up in the course was actually very applicable to jobs. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, obviously, because I found my way back. And I found my first job in 2007 as a full-time designer at the very glamorous location of a cleaning and catering company in Bristol. And I was there for just over a year. I met a boy and I moved to Cambridge, where I worked in an agency environment as a print designer. And I was there for about 5 years. Towards the end of that time, I started getting more involved with sort of web-based projects. And it was quite a sort of basic level, but I really found a love for digital design applications. And yeah, I suppose in 2012, I landed a job at Jagex Game Studio, where I was able to specialize as a digital marketing designer, working on the sort of front-facing websites. And some sort of in-game UI as well. And actually it was there that I met Matt for the first time. And it was because of him that I developed more of an understanding for UX design, because he gave the design team a presentation about what UX design was and why it was important. And that really sort of married up my sort of love for understanding the why behind sort of human behavior and influence. I was actually, as most of us were, made redundant in 2015. And I went to freelance and then agency work for a few years. And alongside that, I sort of developed my understanding around what, UX research, design and usability and heuristics were. So sort of developing that in my own time and applying it to, you know, various sort of agency tasks. And I really enjoyed it, but I also missed sort of the longevity of working in-house on a sort of major project and product. So actually in 2018, I landed a job as a UX UI designer, and that was the first time that I kind of had UX as sort of part of my job title, and was actually able to get a lot more involved with sort of more sort of granular understanding of what I was trying to solve up front, and developing sort of research techniques. And yeah, and it was during that time that I started speaking to Redgate, because I knew about them through things like the meetup groups and social media. And I also knew Matt as a contact. So I went in to talk to them about improving practices at WorldPay. And at the same time was told about the job opportunities there. So the rest is history, as we say. I've been here just over a year. And yeah, learning a huge amount and working alongside some awesome people. And that's me.
Great. Thank you so much, Beth. It's quite interesting to know. I kind of transitioned from graphic design as well, like, but how, even if you go there, how varied the experience could be. So
yeah,
that was amazing. Thank you so much. Alicia, would you like to take over?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, hi. Yeah, so I've been at Redgate for about 3 years now, a little over 3 years. But I suppose, well, how did I sort of get where I am? So I have a degree in psychology. I first got my master's degree, then I became a PhD student, but I sort of quit my PhD at this. It turned out to be a little too theoretical for me. And to be completely honest, when I was a student, a psychology student, I had no idea I would end up in design. I had like loads of ideas around what I could be doing, but sort of nothing too specific. I became a PhD student because I was quite a good student and quite good at academic research. So I thought, okay, maybe I should just stay at university. But then it just maybe didn't meet my expectations exactly. So I sort of quit that, got a job, like an office job in HR, which wasn't very exciting, and started looking for something, you know, I might like be passionate about. And sort of it happened that one of my friends got an internship as a UX designer and sort of told me a little bit about it, and it sounded really interesting. And sort of I, in a way, like how I understood it, it sort of combined design, which I've always been passionate about, sort of research, which I was, in a way, I was quite good at psychology research. I did a lot of it at university, and general problem solving, which I loved. So it just looked like something for me potentially. But then, you know, I think like my degree was somehow relevant. I learned how to be a researcher. I suppose I learned how people sort of perceive the world, how they think, what they remember, which I think is useful. But it still wasn't, you know, it wasn't exactly like maybe the degree you would, you know, normally have for a UX designer, maybe more for a researcher. But anyway, I didn't know how to start. So I found like a course I could do. I actually started like a 1-year postgraduate studies in UX at one of the universities in Poland, which fortunately was really good. So it gave me loads of practical knowledge. I had classes with like sort of real life UXers who were good at what they were doing. I did a diploma project with other students that taught me the process, and that helped me to get my first job. So sort of even before I graduated from that course, I got my first job at like a sort of big Polish IT company, sort of a big software house. And yeah, and I really enjoyed that job. But then it was clear to me that they were not very like mature in terms of UX. It was all starting, and there were not many people to learn from. So I thought actually for my career's sake and learning, I should change my job. So after 7 months, I quit. Well, to be fair, I quit after I got a job, but I found a new job. I quit, and I started working as a UX designer for an e-commerce agency in Warsaw. So I also moved from sort of Krakow, where I lived, to Warsaw, and and sort of I loved that new job. Because it was an agency, I worked for loads of different clients. Most projects were like a few sort of months long, but I did one sort of big project for a big brand that basically spanned like the 2 years I spent there. And yeah, I learned loads. But then I also had this like lifelong dream of living in the UK, or at least for a while. And then sort of the Brexit referendum happened, and that motivated me to sort of hurry up. So I started looking for a job in the UK, and mostly remotely, which is not easy. But I did get a few interviews. I went to London, sort of meet a few companies, and also to Cambridge, and for my sort of Redgate interview. And yeah, no, I did get the job at Redgate in the end, and moved. And it's like over 3 years later, and I'm still here. Yeah, so sort of that's my story. I'm really happy I got into design. I think it's great, and it's not something I expected when I sort of started university. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Alicia. That was super inspiring. Like you were like constantly persevering regardless of what happened, like with your degree or with the job or even with the whole moving countries and stuff. That was amazing. Thank you very much. Matt, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, can do. Yeah, so I'm Matt, the head of design at Redgate. This is quite a long potted story potentially. I'll try and truncate it where I can. So I actually studied law way back when. That was what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I had interest prior to that. I actually at A level I studied similarly psychology, economics, and IT, but for some reason thought that I wanted to kind of go down the legal route. Really enjoyed it, but it was super tough. I don't think I was actually passionate enough to kind of go on and pursue that as a career, and always had that sort of lingering doubt of, well, I really loved psychology and I loved kind of IT, and I found those things kind of came more naturally. So I guess, yeah, on reflection, sort of getting back into a career that sort of brought some of those kind of concepts about human behavior and the why people do things, as Beth was describing, along with kind of a passion and curiosity around technology and where technology was heading, probably brought me back in this direction. So after uni, I had a couple of jobs, nothing particularly exciting, if I'm honest. And then I ended up working for local government for a bit, which was really interesting. I worked as part of their sort of what was called their web transformation team at the time. And it was all about taking paper-based services and turning them into digital. We did a lot of work on kind of information architecture and sort of copywriting of the sort of government service pages. So that was kind of where I kind of sort of found an initial passion, is sort of helping people find information, helping them sort of traverse through online content, helping them kind of complete transactions and tasks before I even knew what user experience was. Then I was lucky enough, sort of my time there, to find some people that effectively kind of were kind of offering some mentoring for me, to really kind of put some structure and form around user experience. Again, at the time, it wasn't really recognized as a kind of practice or a profession that people actually sort of gravitated towards. It was kind of referred to as human computer interaction still, which felt like it didn't feel like the thing that we describe as user experience today. But it was really intriguing. Like I loved the kind of, again, the not just the kind of creative aspect of it, but I loved kind of understanding why people did what they did. Like, why do you go to a website? What are you trying to do? Why do they encounter problems? Why do they think about things and approach things in a different way that sometimes we do, when we're not the actual users of those things? So I was there for a while. It was really cool. I learned a lot of stuff. A lot of kind of things were self-taught as well. I kind of read a hell of a lot, did a load of courses, anything I could basically consume, read, watch, just to help me kind of broaden my understanding. After that, I went to work for Capita for a bit. Capita's massive, but the particular area I worked in was children's services. So I worked on an education platform for schools, which was really cool, actually. So you get to kind of understand, you know, all the systems that my kids' teachers use now, and the sort of pains and frustrations they have to go through, both in sort of an administrative context, but also in terms of sort of planning organizing lesson plans, that kind of stuff. So that was really cool. So I was there for a couple of years. After that, I then went to Jagex, obviously as Beth mentioned, and that was again like really cool, but a completely different sort of industry and context again. So I'd kind of gone from sort of government to education, then into games, and I was there for a few years, and that was a lot of fun, hell of a lot of fun. And I guess what was interesting there is at the time we were sort of trying to bring the sort of two mediums of a kind of website and some web properties together with a game concept and a game UI, and make sure, as Beth was sort of saying, there's kind of a coherent brand around that, but also we were thinking about the experience of a user both playing the game and interacting with the community across those mediums. So that was very cool. Then moved to Redgate, and I actually started out as a product designer or UX designer at the time on our monitoring solution. Was doing that role for a couple of years, then kind of moved into a more sort of senior lead type role, and then eventually ended up, that was about 4 years ago now, moving into a leadership role. So I now work as part of the leadership team alongside peers in engineering and delivery. And that is my story, I think.
Thank you, Matt. I might have some follow-up questions later on, provided you studied law and then the way you transitioned in. So cool. So our final panelist, Elena, take it away.
Oh, hello everyone. I think mine's going to be pretty short and sweet compared to the rest of the stories we've heard. But yeah, I guess I'll start with A-levels because I feel like that's sort of relevant. I think similar to Beth, I was probably like the alternative art kid at GCSE and took that through to A-levels. Still wasn't too sure what I wanted to do in life, but knew I liked creating and designing things. So I studied it's called like art and mixed media. I studied media and photography, and after that I took an art foundation because I was still like, what am I doing in life? I'm not too sure. I need to spend another year figuring this out. And actually that was a really, really good course because that helped me understand what area of sort of designing and creating I actually enjoyed, and that turned out to also be graphics. So off I went to uni, and I went to Norwich University of the Arts. So I don't know if anyone's watching from Norwich, but hi if you are. And yeah, had a really great time there, and I really, really miss it. And I'd say for anyone that's at uni right now, those 3 years have gone so quick, and I keep looking back, I'm like, it was over a year ago since I left now, like that's bonkers. But here we are. So yeah, whilst I was at uni, I suppose, because it's still fairly recent for me. So I spent the first year I think the first year of the graphics course at NUA is sort of about figuring out which direction you want to go for your second and third year, or at least that's how it was when I was there a few years ago. And I'd done first year and I got to second year, and I was actually with my friends, and I saw a sticker on his laptop about UX, and I was like, what's UX? What does this mean? And like, what is this acronym? And that's when I discovered UX. It was as recent as that. And I suddenly become, everything almost like clicked. And on my first year projects clicked in the sense of, I realised it was those interactions and experiences which I really enjoyed designing. So things like where we'd had packaging projects, I was more concerned about how someone might open the box and the design of the box rather than the actual visuals on it. Or when we designed a poster, I was more concerned about, is someone going to go up to it and, I don't know, scan something on it. And I suddenly started realising like this is where my interests lie. And I think as well, I'd done an internship in my first year at a toy designers, which was like the funnest thing ever. But yeah, I suddenly realised, I was like, oh, I actually really enjoy designing, thinking about how they're going to use that and how they're going to interact with it. So I had this bit of a eureka moment, I suppose, in terms of like, oh, this is actually what really interests me. And then the challenge was like, okay, so how on earth do I do that? Which is always a bit daunting, I think. So yeah, I had second year, and in my summer of second year, I applied for a UX internship and did that over the summer, because I think the thing to bear in mind was whilst I discovered my love of UX, my degree was still a bit more like graphics focused. So I had to think about how I could steer some of my projects towards that, because in the back of my mind constantly was, I need to have a portfolio at the end of this that is going to be something I can take to employers. And I think the thing for me was that my portfolio I'd leave uni with at the time was going to be slightly different to what employers would be looking for a UX position. My portfolio would be like full of sort of finished articles and finished pieces, and whereas a UX job looks for sort of more case studies. I suppose we can talk about that in a minute, but that became a bit of a challenge for me. And so things like an internship and sort of steering some of my projects helped me towards developing a more suitable portfolio. And I think I saw the internship for Redgate during my second year, but I was too nervous to go for it, so I pushed my friend to go for it. I was like, I really encouraged him. And I think it's just a thing, isn't it? Like, you get job descriptions can be a bit daunting, and I had not enough self-confidence, but yeah, so here I am anyway. That's how things work out. So I left uni. I did some internships in agencies that were more branding focused, and I knew I wanted to do UX, but it was kind of about taking the opportunities I had at the time and seeing what might come out of those anyway. And I think I decided to work somewhere like Redgate because I think for me, going straight into agency, I just wanted, since I'd interned in agencies, I felt like it was quite fast paced, and I wasn't too sure if I wanted that right early on in my career. So I just wanted somewhere where I could take things a bit slower, have more time to learn perhaps, or feel like I had more time to learn at least. So yeah, that's how I kind of ended up at Redgate. I've been here a little over a year now, learning lots and lots. And with a great bunch of people, much the same as everyone said. So I think, I don't know how long that was, but I think that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Elena. It was quite interesting with your story, because a lot of us has finished degree like a few years ago, but you have all the memories really fresh now, and you're going through the process in detail. So it'll definitely be beneficial for anyone who's just starting out. If you want to point some questions towards Elena, so she can give you a detailed perspective. Let's move on to the questions now that we have all done with our introductions. I have a question from Sarah, quite similar to what I wanted to ask as well. So Sarah asks, hey everyone, thanks so much for putting on the event. I studied psychology at university, graduating in 2018, and I'm now a month into 6-month course studying UX design to change my career path from sales to UX. It is so encouraging to hear many of you started in psychology, but what advice would you give someone just starting out, and any pointers to find that first role in UX? Who would like to take this?
I don't mind starting. I mean, I won't have a huge amount to say on it. I mean, obviously I just did psychology at A level, but by the sounds of things, you've got a lot more experience in that. And actually, I think that kind of will benefit you trying to move into a UX role, because you have that sort of core understanding around user behavior and, what can influence someone and why people might make certain decisions. So to use that sort of understanding and apply it in more of a sort of design UX related way, I think will benefit you hugely. And I probably would advise that if you're sort of looking for sort of quite a sort of career change, to try and find yourself in an organization that has a department similar to that. So somewhere that, at Jagex, for example, when I was there, we had a huge range of skills under one roof. And, I'd go and talk to the development team to learn about web design. I'd have a chat to Matt to learn about UX. I'd talk to the animators just because I was curious. And if you work in an organization which have these different disciplines, then, you can kind of use them to sort of figure out how you could potentially get more involved with what they're doing and develop that side of your sort of skill set to work your way across to that role.
That's great. Thank you, Beth.
One of the things I was just going to add, I guess, is when sort of folks apply, like we've had a lot of people in the past that have sort of come to us and they're looking to sort of switch from other careers. I guess some of the things we look for is their ability. I mean, even if it doesn't come up in everyday work, right? Like that, maybe they're not in the line of work now, that gives them a chance to really kind of apply some of those skills to a particular project. But folks I have seen kind of do that switch successfully have found kind of alternative routes to expose themselves to projects that give them a chance to demonstrate what they can do and what they know. So it might be like a charity project or a side project or something that just allows them to kind of demonstrate that they can actually take more of a kind of sort of design thinking approach to solving a particular problem. So that's, I guess, one kind of observation from where we've seen folks in the past who don't have that direct day-to-day exposure are looking to switch, but maybe they need something behind them that allows them to demonstrate that they do have those kind of skills and at least an appreciation of the end-to-end design process.
I would just maybe add something quickly, if that's okay. It's related to what Matt says, because in a way, I think because maybe your position, the person who asked that question, is a little similar to mine. Normally, when you apply for a job, even at this like junior internship level, employers still expect some sort of a portfolio. And I think it's much easier to have a portfolio if you studied design, because then like you have some design projects to show from university. But if you didn't study design, like what do you show in your portfolio? So I think what Matt said, trying to do some projects, somehow projects related to like UX, either like maybe for someone you know, or a charity, or even like a mock project. I think we did see like just project someone. So okay, you decide, okay, I want to explore like designing a new cooking app because I'm passionate about it and all the ones I'm using are useless, and you just sort of go through that process and put it in your portfolio. When I was starting, I also put in my portfolio the projects that were not strictly UX but were somehow related. I put like a research project I did as a sort of PhD student, but that was an academic research project, but it showed my like research skills. And I put like a website I designed for someone I know, but that was more like actually coded that website to learn front end, and it was very simple, so there wasn't like a big process behind it, but it still showed, okay, I can actually design something and code it. So I think it's just like, how do you prepare that first portfolio? Just put something there, whatever you can really, like to show your skills, whatever skills you have.
Thank you, guys. That definitely helps. And in terms of portfolio, what you guys mentioned was, at the moment, we're going through the recruitment process for internship. And as soon as we see a portfolio, the whole picture comes to life. But when you just see words that they have done, it's quite hard to, connect their skill set with it. But so a portfolio is definitely a great way forward. So whilst we are in the psychology question, we've got a question from Tom Chan. So Tom asks, most of you seem to have had some background in psychology. Do you think this led you towards the user-focused area of UX? Alicia, would you like to take it?
No, is it me? Because I suppose I have like a sort of maybe the most experience of psychology. I mean, again, to be fair, when I was a psychology student, I as I said, I didn't know I would become a designer. But I think what helped me, but I was always interested in design. But I think what helped me a lot, maybe depends sort of on your, like what part of psychology you focus on. I was mostly focused on sort of cognitive psychology, and I did a lot of research. I did like some research for my master's degree. I did some research as a PhD student. And to be fair, I think the research side helped me the most. So I think as often when you study psychology, you're also taught how to be like a psychology researcher and how to do methodologically correct research. And then a lot of designers do research as well. I mean, some don't. So some companies have researchers, but we do. And I think this kind of like research background helps a lot. But I think then also just the fact that you know how people sort of perceive things, what they remember, sort of the biases, like cognitive biases they experience. I think it all helps to some degree. And it's almost like hard to tell how it helps. It's just, I think it's just like this way of thinking you have. So I would say it is quite like a useful degree, but then maybe the design aspect, the like pure aesthetics and how to like put what to put on the page and where, maybe that won't help with that so much. Well, maybe on like a higher level.
I think kind of coming at it from sort of the opposite side of sort of when I was just sort of pure churning out design and sort of specializing in print and advertising and branding, it was enjoyable, don't get me wrong, and there are people that specialize in that and absolutely nail it. But what I wasn't understanding or sort of experiencing was that my design didn't really influence or impact people particularly. They could appreciate the aesthetics of it, or, you know, the editorial piece that it aligned with would sort of communicate what the story told, but it didn't tell a story in itself. And so sort of applying an extra layer of sort of the psychology around sort of why you're doing something and sort of the impact that you're trying to make with it. I think that, you know, marrying those two up for, you know, people that want to specialize within UX can have a huge impact for me anyway, around, you know, feeling like what I'm doing is sort of influencing certain behavior, not in a negative way, obviously, but in something that is quite positive. You bring delight to the people that use your product as a result of implementing it in, you know, an easy to use and intuitive way. But you can't do that without first understanding who it is that's using it and what they want to get out of it. So yeah, it's kind of the marrying of the two disciplines, I think.
I think that's a really important point. It kind of teaches you about being mindful and intentional with what you're designing. Like there's a person on the end of the screen that's trying to use and consume and understand the thing that you're designing. They're there to do a thing, but your thing fits in to their lives in some way, and it may be, you know, it may be significant, it may be less significant, but I think coming at it with a kind of human first and understanding the psychology behind why people do the things they do really helps you apply design and think about, you know, cause and effect. We design a thing to drive or encourage a certain behavior, but also behaviors have consequences as well, positive and negative. So it helps you really kind of think about people differently. I think that's kind of core to what we do.
Thank you so much, guys. So alongside the same topic of transitioning from different careers into this, we have an interesting question from Manpriya. So Manpriya says, what do you think about transitioning from software development to UX? Any suggestions for me? Side note, I'm trying to bring my development team to think more about the users and not just assume it seems to start working. Sorry, I'm trying to bring my development team to think more about the users and not just assume things, and it seems to start working gradually. Who would like to take it?
So when I was at Jagex, one of the people that really did have quite an influence around sort of what I was outputting and designing and why, obviously one of those was Matt, but another one was a lead of a development team who, you know, was a front-end developer, very good at it, but really got me to think about sort of why I was implementing stuff. And his team were sort of open to sort of collaborating and brainstorming ideas with me. And that sort of crossover of disciplines can output something that's incredibly strong. Like you understanding sort of the how something is made and built can really sort of heavily influence the why something is done as well. And I mean, usability principles move into things like development. You know, if you think about semantic markup, the reason that you're calling something or referring to something in a particular way is to make it more usable for other developers. So it could be that you start on a path like that, so something that they can actually relate to, tell the story in a way that it relates to them. You know, tell the story of, have you ever had to work on another developer's code? You open it and you're like, I haven't got a clue what on earth any of this relates to or how it's connected. You know, we build components within web development to make something more usable and more transferable and to make developers' lives easier. So if you come at it from that sort of aspect, I think it starts to help them understand the why of something like that is important. And you can then sort of transfer it onto the product that you're producing and the type of person that uses it.
Great, thank you very much, Beth. Just trying to think if I could relate to any other questions coming here, but anyway, let's go for this one. Thank you very much, Blazenko. I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your name, so sorry. So he's got a question from Matt. How many years of experience did you have before starting your design lead role? What was the new/different in your everyday work when compared to the role prior to it? What would be your advice on skills, knowledge to obtain in order to transition to a head or a lead role? How did you prepare for it?
Okay, you might have to cue some of the subparts of that question up for me in a second. So how many years experience? So I was probably about 10 years into my kind of professional UX career before I moved into this role, but I've done, I don't know if you necessarily describe them on paper, they weren't lead level roles, but I've led kind of teams and groups of people who call themselves designers in the past. But I'd say probably about 7-8 years into my kind of career as a sort of individual contributor before I started transitioning into anything you describe as a sort of lead or management level position. Just looking at the next part of the question.
Sorry, Matt, it must be in the answered section.
Yeah, it is somewhere.
Okay, so what was the new different in your
different
work compared
yeah,
to
good, yeah, good one. What is very different is the fact that when you move from kind of like an individual contributor to a lead or a manager, you have to become very comfortable with distancing yourself a bit more from the work day to day. So it might sound odd, but you know, I spend very little of my time day to day now in tools like Sketch and Figma, and actually I used to love doing that. That would be like, you know, the reason I get up and get out of bed and go to work is so I can like really tinker with like the craft. So now I kind of have to, or I've had to learn to sort of step back from that a bit and actually support the team. But I think that's a big adjustment. You kind of go from sort of being the person that's doing the design to being the person that's supporting the design work and the team, and that's quite a hard transition to start with. You know, as many time you want to just kind of jump in and sort of tinker and be quite sort of directive. Like it's quite hard to find that balance between kind of imparting your kind of knowledge, but in a way that is not trying to solve the problem for people or direct them to a solution, because that's why we hire good people, is because they have the smarts and they should have the kind of autonomy to solve those problems themselves. But it's quite hard trying to sort of guide and support, but without kind of directing or resisting the temptation just to jump in and start playing with the tools. That's tricky.
Well, the following part was, what would your advice be on skills to obtain in order to transition into a lead role? How did you prepare for it?
Specific skills. I think communication is a big part. Like it might sound like the obvious one, but I think there's a hell of a lot of my role now that is basically communication. So again, you know, talking about tools, I'd probably put down tools like Figma and Sketch, and I spend most of my time now in things like PowerPoint and writing documents and doing presentations and sort of facilitating sessions, that kind of stuff. So sort of a different toolkit, but relying heavily on sort of fundamentals of communication and building relationships. I think that's the kind of more you move into lead level positions and above, it's all about kind of relationships. It's all about being able to kind of persuade and influence others, and to develop those kind of skills as a leader, which means I need to kind of, you know, make sure I need to make sure I am there to support these folks. I need to make sure I understand what's important to them, what's motivating them, how they aspire to grow, how the business is looking to move forward, and try and bring those things together. So yeah, it's kind of a different set of skills, a different set of tools, and getting to grips with being much more at arm's length with what you would have commonly associated as a design role.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that, Matt. We've got a few more questions to go through, so let's make this quicker. Question for Elena. Hello from NUA. Great to see you again. What was the transition from uni to Redgate like? And what kind of work have you been involved in there? Some of our first and second year UX design students are here tonight. Do you have any advice for them? Anything you know now that you would wish you'd learned earlier? Thank you.
No pressure then.
No pressure at all.
Yeah, no, hello, first of all. Hope you're enjoying anyway. And yeah, hi Dave. Shout out to Dave, who's like a legend in my third year, because I had a nightmare with After Effects and he just saved me before the degree show with trying to like get some kind of mock-up into an iPhone or God knows what. So yeah, he was super duper helpful. I won't forget that. But yeah, I've scribbled. I've just actually I saw that question. I've scribbled down a few things, so I might like look down and refer to my my notes. But you might just have to prompt me, Divya, if I like forget bits. But yeah, I think what was my transition like? I'd say, and I'm sure the rest of you won't mind me saying, like I feel like I got thrown straight into stuff and sort of doing stuff, and that was great because I'm very much a person that learns by doing, and I appreciate the trust Redgate have had in me to kind of just sort of start inputting into things straight away. It's definitely like a nice sense of satisfaction to almost sort of like see the impact of what you're doing straight away, and so early on in your career as well, which I think is really good. So in terms of like what I've been up to since I left NUA, and the sorts of work we do, I've been up to a lot of learning, and that's because at Redgate we the domain we work in is really technical, so we make database tools. Yeah, someone's gonna have to correct me, but like make database management tools essentially, and to do that it requires a level of understanding about how all of that works in the first place. And I think a key thing I'd say is if someone's at uni and they're thinking about going into something that's either quite technical or so, don't let it put you off the fact that you've got to learn stuff. I think it can feel quite overwhelming at first, but I think see it as a challenge. I'm definitely still learning loads each day, and for the work I've been up to, I think the way we're sort of set up at Redgate is that the more junior members do some more of the tactical work, and because I've got sort of stronger design skills, I'll perhaps do like, I've started off with sort of smaller, quicker pieces of work, and now I'm sort of building up to focus on like slightly longer things and sort of seeing that process through a bit more, but also obviously with plenty of some support and direction, and in terms of like what sort of decisions I can make at each stage of the process, I think, because I think that's felt a bit scary as well, is kind of knowing that I don't need to ask for permission to like do something. It's like almost just like this is what I feel like I'm gonna do, this is what I'm gonna run with, and almost do like a bit of an intent check. Like that's been a bit of a learning curve for me. But what was the next bit of the question, Divya? Was it something about like what advice would I give? Now,
give me a second.
Can't remember.
So do you have any advice? Some of our first and second year, okay, do you have any advice for them? Anything you know that you wish you'd learned earlier?
I always love this question because I've probably like loads of stuff that's going to come to mind later that I'm just not going to remember on the spot now. But first of all, enjoy uni. For me, like there was definitely times where it felt mega stressful. I'd be staying in the studio late and I'd that would become my life and whatever, but I think just remember to enjoy it as well, because those 3 years go so quick, and anyway is a lovely bunch of people, and yeah, make make the most of it, although I know we're probably a lot of you are working from home, I imagine, now. But other things that I wish I'd have learned sooner, I've put a couple down here. So I think first and foremost, you've got to believe in your work. I remember, you know, we have our critique sessions and sometimes they could feel pretty heavy. Don't let that kind of take over you. If you believe in your work, keep on with it. And you've got to be able to talk about it at the end of the day with your portfolio. So you need to sort of believe in that work and be able to speak about it fairly fluently. So definitely I'd say persevere. But in terms of like sort of to help you with making that transition into UX, it's a weird this is a weird one. It might seem a really obvious one, but I feel like I just didn't do this soon enough. It's just like, make sure you get yourself set up on your socials. So like making a Twitter was really useful for me because like I guess the UX community is quite like really welcoming for a start on Twitter, and it's a big community, and that was a really useful way for me to just begin to like, I don't know, learn about different jobs, learn about what's out there, learn a bit about sort of people close to me that I could begin to talk to and speak to. So I think I would do that if you haven't, which might seem like a strange suggestion, but it definitely helped me. And then also, I guess one thing I really had to ramp up is like being a communicator. So a big part of this job is kind of making sure that asking those awkward questions and making sure you understand kind of the scope of the work you're doing and stuff. So I'd definitely say, because I don't know how the course works now, but if there's group projects and stuff, really focus on trying to align the group and like think about what your outcome is, and make sure you can sort of build up on those communication skills, because I think you're going to rely on that heavily when you leave and whatever position you get put in. But yeah, no, I think that's probably all the things I can think of now. There's probably going to be loads more at some point later, probably when I go to bed and it all comes to my head. Probably what I'd say for now.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Elena. We probably have time for a couple of questions. I would like to take this from Joseph Rossetto. What do you think that missed in your journey that might have helped you achieve the same goals or milestones sooner or better in terms of more knowledge, more skills, more connections, or anything else? I think that's a great question. I'd like to take it.
I don't mind starting. It's you know what I wish I'd done more when I was at university was actually made the most of the opportunity for an internship, which wasn't something that I did, to sort of have time to be able to volunteer in places and learn a little bit more in the real world. I think I would have probably started my career in design a little bit sooner. And I think I probably, this is going to be controversial. I may not have done my university degree at all. I may have just gone straight into UX or design and learnt off others. I'm a big believer in learning off others, and actually you can do an awful lot of that now through social media, and building up connections and coming to things like this, you know, when you can network and sort of ask questions and be curious. I'm quite an introverted person, so over the years I've sort of relaxed around that, but I wish I'd sort of been more curious earlier in my career, because I think you can learn an awful lot of people that have sort of been through it already.
That's great, Beth. Thank you very much. Yeah, Elena, go ahead.
I'll mute myself. Similar to that, but about staying curious. I don't know if this counts, but like, don't put a pressure on yourself I have to probably remind me of the question, but I just felt like if there's something I wish I had done, it was just to like be more chill. I felt like there was so much pressure on myself to like know exactly my specialism or know exactly what I want to do, and I feel like I still don't quite know exactly particularly what I love or what I want to do. So I think particularly for like more junior members, like when you're just leaving uni, I don't know the person who's asked a question like where they're on in their career, but don't feel that pressure, because I feel like a lot of people around you can sort of really seem like they know what they're doing, and I've definitely felt that, and I would say that I wish I hadn't have sort of tried to make myself decide things so quickly. It's okay not to know. So I don't know if that counts. It sounds like very vague, but it felt like it needed to be said.
Oh, that's perfectly honest, and I think that's what we want to hear.
I was just going to say, like, my top tip would be don't sort of stress about the perfect design. I think designers get super hung up, and I did early on in my career, about having the perfect design and that perfect thing becoming reality. And sort of lessons will teach quickly that's rarely the case. You have to compromise, you have to be pragmatic, and it might not feel right and it might not feel just, but that is kind of life, you know. So aiming for perfection is a quick way to sort of burn yourself out, and to learn some hard lessons. So yeah, don't aim for perfection, aim for the best you can do in the moment.
Thank you. One last question. So Rayanne had asked I was wondering, does a UXer need to be good at coding? What's the difference between UX, UI, and graphic designer? Who wants to give a rapid fire answer?
I'll try, and feel free to jump in, guys. No, I don't think you need to be good at coding. I am certainly not a coder, but I understand through talking to developers what isn't possible, and sometimes I will question that based upon the research that I do in relation to, you know, what I'm trying to achieve. Sometimes the developer might turn around and say that's not possible, and I'll go away and do a bit of research and be like, well, here's an example. Difference between UX, UI, and graphic design, to try and answer quickly, UX is more probably focused on that sort of end-to-end understanding the problem and coming to a solution, sort of full journey. UI probably is the experience that a user will see and how that research is sort of implemented within a product. So like a user interface, it's, you know, like a website, or it could be a ticketing machine, a parking station. It's that kind of interactive layer around sort of understanding what you're trying to achieve. Graphic design is probably more marketing based. I don't know if any of you guys agree or disagree with me, but it's probably more around sort of print related stuff. So, you know, like advertising or branding, it's more relatable to kind of the marketing layer when you're trying to communicate a brand or communicate a message or a kind of core belief. And it's, yeah, a discipline I was never sort of honed in to do, but I've got some awesome friends that do some amazing graphic design.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Beth. I do want to open one more question, only because it's got a couple of upvotes and it's been there for a while. So just quickly, this is for Beth. You implied there are differences in the way that work on projects work when comparing in-house to agency work. What are the notable differences, and is there one you recommend over the others for juniors just getting started after uni?
I probably shouldn't have spoken on the last question, but so yeah, agency work and in-house work, there's obviously crossovers between the two, but I would have said agency work is probably more varied. So you could have, so for example, I was designing people who loved horse racing. It was like an ability to be able to sort of manage your own stable, a little bit like you would do with fantasy football. And in the same instance, I was working for a fertility clinic that would help people to, you know, have children and you know, manage IVF and things like that. And the next instance, I'll be working for a council-based company. So you get a huge variety of clients. the downside for me was that you never really had the longevity necessarily or the time to be able to really invest, because you're always selling a service, and to sell UX and research as a service in the agencies that I was in was quite difficult to do. Now, there are agencies out there that do that very well. Unfortunately, in the time that I was there, it probably wasn't managed as well as it could have been, because I think I was the only one that was like, can we do some research maybe? And in-house, you get longevity. You get to really invest and understand the product in a lot more detail. So as far as like starting out in your career, it really... agency will give you variety, and it will develop probably more skills than specializing within UX. I would have said if you're in-house, my experience, and this may not apply to an awful lot to every single company, but my experience has been that I've been able to focus on a specialism and work alongside a lot of people and get more involved with what they're doing, because you have a little bit more time to invest in the sort of development of a particular product.
Awesome. Thank you, Beth.
I can add something quickly, because before Redgate I also worked for an agency, and I actually agree sort of 100% with what Beth said, how in a way as an agency you have a lot of product, but it's maybe the work is more shallow. You just do it like you do a project quickly, you move to another project, versus well, at least here at Redgate you usually you sort of assign to a product and you look after it long term, and you do like a lot of sort of longer projects around that sort of product, and you see what sort of you see in a way like the impact of your work, like actually you can see like are people actually using what you designed, versus at an agency you didn't see much. But maybe actually I wanted to add something to like someone, I think the second part of the question was what's better for someone who's starting. So I'm thinking on one hand, working at an agency is good for building a portfolio. We spoke about the portfolio. I think you can get put a lot of projects in your portfolio in like a short time. So I think you work on an agency for a year and you already might have like 5 projects you can talk about. Maybe they were not so in depth, but they're there. But then I'm thinking, at least from my experience, I think the process, like if you actually want to learn the sort of design process, you might have more you might follow a sort of a better process if you work sort of in-house. So I think at an agency you're often in a hurry, you have to skip a lot of stages. You're just like doing something because the client, they want to see the prototype, they want to see the final design, and often they don't care like how you get there, at least from my experience. And at Redgate where I work now, like you have time to go sort of through that long process that will lead you to the best result, and you can learn that process as a result. So that's what I've noticed.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think it's time to wrap up. I just want to leave a bunch of information before you guys go very quickly. And thank you, Spalton, for keeping up with the questions. Really appreciate that. So just to inform you guys, we are currently hiring. We are opened up our product design internship for the summer of 2021. So if you're interested or know somebody else who would be interested to apply, find more information in our website under our careers page. We also have loads more other varied roles as well, like loads of software engineer roles and lots more. So feel free to check it out and share it around. So as I always say, we are always on a call for speakers. So if you wish to talk or someone who is passionate about a certain topic, feel free to contact us. We would love to host you. It would be a great opportunity for all of us. And we especially welcome people from the underrepresented communities and also first timers as well. So the best way to contact would be get in touch with us on Twitter, or you can also contact us through the meetup page as well. And you can follow Ingeniously Simple in several platforms. We blog regularly on Medium. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, where this video will be posted later on. And we also have lots of podcasts about various topics like engineering, development, product design, and lots more as well. So feel free to check it out. And yeah, a massive thank you to all of you for giving your time today evening. It's been great. I hope you all found it really useful, and hope the tips and guidance would help you out in your next future journeys. And thank you all the panelists, and keep an eye on our Twitter account for our next event. Most likely it will be in 2021. So yeah, we would all like to see you again, and thank you everybody. Have a great evening.